Hi, I'm Dan Hilton, Research Manager with HousingLink, and welcome to the inaugural webinar for our Minneapolis Rental Housing Brief. HousingLink is a Minnesota-based nonprofit with a mission of helping improve people's lives through information expanding their affordable rental choices. HousingLink receives between 50,000 to 60,000 visits to our website a month from people looking for information. Many of those visits from low to moderate income Minnesotans and social service providers who are looking for housing options through our rental housing search tools, or just availing themselves of resources we have to help people navigate the very complex world of affordable housing. A smaller but dedicated group of visits to our website are from people with an interest in data and policy, and I'm thinking that likely includes you if you're tuning into this webinar. HousingLink contributes research and analysis to local policy discussion, with a couple of our flagship resources being our Streams database of publicly funded affordable housing and our Twin Cities Rental Review database of private market rents. The Streams database, which can be accessed at www.housinglink.org/streams, is a publicly accessible and searchable database of over 116,000 rental housing units in Minnesota with public funding that guarantees below market rents. Twin Cities Rental Review is, or has been at least to this point, a quarterly report of 10 to 15,000 private market rental listings in the Twin Cities 7-county metro area. It provides information on median rents by bedroom size and building type for 66 submarkets within the region. And it's diving in a little deeper into that Twin Cities Rental Review data that really provides the basis for our work on the Minneapolis Rental Housing Brief, which I'm going to cover today. So, what is the Minneapolis Rental Housing Brief? Well, issues of affordable housing have taken on greater importance to the city of Minneapolis recently than at any time in our 20-plus years as an organization. Minneapolis Rental Housing Brief is our effort to respond to the need for up-to-date and accurate information with a number of valuable rental market metrics trended year over year and, in many cases, on a monthly basis. So, let's dig in. As you can see, we're on the HousingLink website, www.housinglink.org. I'm going to go over the Data and Research drop-down and the Minneapolis Rental Housing Brief. You can always find the most up-to-date issue of our report on this page. If you don't want to have to check back in every month, you can subscribe to the report, but that's your call. Now, I think this works best on a desktop, but you should be able to see an embedded version of the report right on your screen. As you can see, you can scroll or zoom right on your interface. You can also download the report in a couple of different places on the page. Well, we're going to say that I've downloaded the report and already saved it to my local machine. So here we are. We began publishing the Minneapolis Rental Housing Brief in January, so this is our third monthly report today. One change I'll mention off the top is that we actually just launched the inaugural St. Paul Rental Housing Brief as well. So where you didn't see anything before, you now see Minneapolis in the upper right corner of the report. So the first page is just a cover page, and on page 2 we dig into actual data. And at the top of page 2, we're looking at median rents. Now, the one thing that's important to know with our data is that it's based on vacancy listings. So if there's an instance where, say, a family's been living for 5 years in an apartment and the rent goes up, we're not going to capture that. We are going to capture what rent the unit is listed at when that family does move out, whether it goes up or stays the same. The data is also pretty sensitive to newly constructed units that hit the market. So going rent that is being charged for already occupied units is something that we don't see. But we like to say that we're showing you exactly, by definition, what a renter is facing in the open market. So what are we seeing in March 2019? We're actually seeing no increase in median rent for one-bedroom rentals and a slight decrease year over year for 2 and 3 bedrooms. This is fairly notable and may be a surprise to folks who've been following skyrocketing rents over the past few years. I will say that in both our January and February reports, we were still showing double-digit year-over-year rent increases for each of these bedroom sizes. So, a little early to declare this an official softening of the market, but definitely something to keep our eye on. Now, I mentioned earlier the notion of what a renter is facing in the open market, but sometimes it's not even a matter of whether a family feels it could find a way to pay rent on a monthly basis, but whether they can secure the home at all. Commonly, landlords will require a renter to make 2.5 times the rent amount every month in order to even qualify for moving in the first place. This next set of figures shows you what that actually looks like by bedroom size. So if your income is not at least $3,825 a month, you would not qualify to rent the median 2-bedroom home in Minneapolis this month or this March. Moving down, HousingLink identifies building type among rental vacancies. Now, it's easy when thinking about rental to think only about multifamily, those big apartment complexes. Well, it's worth noting that around 30% of vacancies posted in Minneapolis are currently not multifamily. So they're single-family homes, duplexes, condos, townhomes. You can see the distribution is pretty consistent with last year. I'll mention that during the tail end of the housing crisis, say late 2011, early 2012, that distribution was a lot closer to 50% apartment or multifamily and 50% everything else. A lot of single-family homes that were foreclosed on went into the rental market, and that number has steadily gone down over time. And what we're seeing for March 2019 is that of all the rental vacancies we looked at, 69% were multifamily apartments, 10% were single-family homes, and 21% were of another building type. Okay, on this next page, we're looking at year-over-year one-bedroom rents in 3 types of vacancies: tax credit properties, market rate properties, and a subset of properties that are listed on the HousingLink website. Tax credits, or low-income housing tax credits, or you might hear them referred to as LIHTC, are the federal government's primary program these days for the development of affordable units. The program encourages private investment in exchange for maintaining affordability for a certain percentage of units in a property. Units are usually kept affordable to families making 50% or 60% of the area median income, which is currently $45,000 to $55,000 a year for a family of 4. Next to that, you see those rents versus one-bedroom market rate rents. That is to say, with no public intervention specifically keeping rents affordable. And finally, we chose to include rents for vacancies posted on HousingLink.org. So while we're all sitting here thinking of HousingLink as a research organization, 30 to 40,000 folks a month are coming to our website to look for a place to live. HousingLink provides affordable rental vacancy listings on our website, and we have a hard cap on rent amount. Landlords may not post a vacancy unless the rent is affordable to a family making 100% of the area median income. Okay, now looking at the bottom of the page, if you're involved in the housing world or follow housing news, you've undoubtedly heard of the term NOAH, which stands for Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing. This is housing that's not obligated to affordability in any way. It simply is affordable due to the natural forces of the market, or because a landlord voluntarily elects to keep rents below market, or whatever. But there's nothing keeping that property affordable. New NOAH housing is not being built, but older housing that has been affordable due to its location, its lack of amenities, age, usually a combination of factors, is seen as at risk for market forces driving those rents up. In some instances, NOAH properties are purchased and renovated and then put back on the market with much higher rents. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot of interest in preserving the NOAH housing stock we have. We're tracking the number of NOAH vacancies that we see, and Indeed, numbers are significantly down from last year. I'll mention that this is consistent with what we've seen in each of the past 3 Minneapolis rental housing brief reports that we've released this year. February and January were each down pretty significantly from the same month in the prior year for all 3 bedroom sizes. Okay, percent of vacancies affordable by income level. So what are we talking about here? A commonly accepted rule of thumb pertaining to affordability suggests that a household should not pay over 30% of its income on housing costs. Now, every rent figure we've been looking at so far has been reporting on contract rents. That is to say, literally, the rent you see in the vacancy posting. But as we all know, there are other housing costs to consider. Namely, when you're talking about rental, this comes in the form of utilities. So what we've done on this page is look at gross housing costs. That is contract rent plus utilities. Our analysis is based on an estimate of utility cost likely for a given unit based on both its number of bedrooms and its building type. And what you plainly see is that the percent of vacancies that are affordable to families drops off tremendously when you go from an income that is 60% of the area median to an income that is 50% of the area median. And when you get down to 30% of the area median, a household with that income is simply not going to find any openings they can afford on the open market. So the lowest income Minnesotans must turn to the subsidized housing market. Again, this is where there has been direct investment by housing funders to either keep rents at an affordable level or to subsidize the portion of the rent for which a family is responsible. One program people often think of in terms of subsidized housing is the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or what's commonly referred to as Section 8 vouchers. There are currently no open waiting lists for any housing authority in the Twin Cities for obtaining a Housing Choice Voucher. And even if there were, a family that qualifies can spend years just on the waiting list before they're finally actually given a voucher. Then, they may take that voucher into the private market and present it to a landlord. However, a landlord is not currently obligated to accept a Housing Choice Voucher anywhere in Minnesota. And in some instances, it may be that the landlord is in theory willing to accept a Section 8 voucher, but their rents exceed that which the housing authority is able to subsidize. So a lot of factors going into why it can be difficult to obtain a Section 8 housing. In March 2019, only 13 one-bedroom vacancies, 17 two-bedroom vacancies, and 7 three-bedroom vacancies indicated that they were willing to accept a voucher. So whether because there were no landlords willing or no landlords able to provide a housing option for a voucher holder, some families must forfeit their voucher back to the housing authority that issued it. In the first 3 months of 2019, we found that 16 vouchers were forfeited in this manner. That said, we saw an increase in the waiting list openings on our website. This would include not only Housing Choice Voucher waitlist openings, but also instances where other waitlists were opened up. It could be public housing through the housing authority or privately owned project-based Section 8 properties with units that are subsidized by the federal government. Okay, housing stock. The city of Minneapolis has very generously made rental license data available through their open data portal, and we've been using periodic downloads of that data to track characteristics of the rental market in the city. Overall rental stock is pretty consistent, having ticked up just 1% in terms of overall rental units since the end of last year. The city tracks license types by tier, with Tier 3 rentals being those which require excessive city services, are poorly maintained or managed, and may be at a higher risk for fire damage. This month's report shows the total number of licenses in the Tier 3 category down nearly 6% from last year. And finally, the city began licensing short-term rental units just last year, and as of March this year, there were 838 units under that classification. Interestingly, that figure is down a bit since a peak of over 1,000 at the end of last year, which I can honestly say was kind of a surprise to me. On this next page, we're analyzing data that is based exclusively on projects vetted or written about by Finance and Commerce publication for both its Twin Cities Apartment Development Tracker and its Twin Cities Apartment Sales Tracker, both of which are available through subscription at, show it here, www.finance-commerce.com. The top figures are our way of viewing the pipeline of projects that are in the works in terms of whether the projects contain exclusively affordable units, exclusively market rate or luxury units, or a mixture of both. And below, we're looking at the average price per unit of apartment sales in the city over the past 12 months. In our first 3 iterations of this report, we were looking at a quarterly total of data. And for this quarter, we've decided to increase our sample size by looking at an entire year's worth of data. It's quite notable that the per unit cost is up 48% over the previous 12 months. And finally, we've included a page of notable housing facts. The top 2 figures, both cost-burdened renters and homeless Minneapolis public school students, can only be updated on an annual basis, but we thought these were both important pieces of context to share in conjunction with other numbers you're seeing in this report. The 2 figures at the bottom of the page, both housing openings with 1 or more accessible features and veteran-friendly openings, are derived from vacancies posted to the HousingLink website and updated monthly. And that brings us to the end of the report. It's no lie. If you have any questions about the data in this report, you can let me know. Again, I'm Dan Hilton, Research Manager, and you'll find additional contacts on this page for media inquiries or if you'd like to see us develop a similar report for your community. Feel free to poke around the HousingLink website to see what other resources we have available, and I direct you specifically to our research and data section to find out some of the other research pieces that we put together. Thank you very much for your time.